Hello, 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 and welcome to Kindred Skols. My name is Greg Blake. I'm so excited to be with you this evening. And we have it, folks, our very first Mailbag episode. The very first one. We're doing it. We're diving in. And no, it is not a bag of mails, as my wife thought, which I don't exactly understand how she could have thought that. It is actually a bag full of mail, questions that we gleaned from Twitter. We're really excited about it. I'm joined this evening, as always, with my lovely and brilliant and talented co-hosts, Nick Olson. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Greg. I'm excited. The Twitter crowd came through. We got some great questions. So excited to dive in.
We really did. We got a bunch of them. And I'm also joined, as always, by my other lovely, talented, brilliant co-host, Mr. Matt Freese. How are you this evening, Matt?
Doing fantastic, Greg. I got a question for you, actually. So
Sure.
when you're trying to explain the concept of of a mailbag to your wife,
Yeah.
did you invoke Blue's Clues and we're like, we just got a letter and all?
Well, it was a very confusing response, especially given that she also listens to podcasts. And I was like, why would that be the first thought you jump to? A bag full of men? Like, what does that even, does that exist in this world? I've never even heard of that. But that's how her brain works, and that's why I love her. So, do you guys want to just dive into this thing? You want to set it up at all? All right.
Let's dive in. We got nothing to plug. Let's go straight to it, baby.
There's nothing to talk about. Let's just dive right into the questions. Okay, so what we've done here, just to set things up for the listeners a little bit, we did get some questions. We got actually a pretty good variety of questions. I'm really excited about it. But some of the questions are in similar categories. So I might, we'll kind of group things into sections. And then there might be a tweet or two that I will read together because the responses will kind of bleed into each other. So, we don't want to belabor it. So just to set things up a little bit there. So let's start off with a little section about our new head coach. Of course, what else is there? That's the big thing to talk about. And we didn't get a chance. I wasn't here last week. And I wanted to say thank you guys for taking the lead. I'm still kind of bummed that we didn't get to do our Harbaugh episode because I led with such a good pun, and it still exists in recorded form. And I don't know, maybe I should tweet it sometime, but I digress. Let's get right into the mailbag. Let's start with Kevin O'Connell questions. And I think this is a really good general question to start with. What are KOC's, are we sure that's what we're calling him? Are we sure that's what we're going with?
Kevin O'Connell.
I like Kev.
I think KOC is probably going to.
I don't know.
People gravitate to, man. It's hard.
I'm not sure that's going to work for me.
You need a single syllable nickname, but Kevin is not going to get abbreviated. Like Zim. Zim's a great nickname.
Yeah.
It's one syllable, and 3 letters. O'Connell, the accent's on the second syllable, but you can't omit the O, so Cock is kind of the only option.
And you can't really call him Kev because that makes him
Speaking
sound
of a bag of mails.
Yeah.
Right. Mailbag episode's already off the rails.
Wow, right with the blue stuff, right at the top from Nick. Wow. All right, so let me start with this question over. I really don't know how I feel about KOC, but what are KOC's main strengths and weaknesses? And we got that question from a friend of the show, Vince Bellinger at @BBellinger on Twitter. Guys, I'm going to let you take the lead most of the evening here. Nat, let's start with you. What do you think KOC's main strengths and weaknesses are?
Yeah, so obviously, we don't know a ton about Kevin O'Connell, right? And I think there are a lot of open question marks that I couldn't put in the strengths or weaknesses category at this point. I would say that strengths, definitely from reading the profiles of him and, trying to get a sense of who he is, would be, first and foremost, communication. That's what everybody touts. If you look at Matthew Stafford, some of his quotes coming in about how Kevin really helped him get installed into that Rams offense, right, which is different from what he came from. He ran a bunch of different schemes in Detroit, but I don't think anything was quite like what Sean McVay is running down there in Los Angeles. So I think that communication is the big part. And obviously he comes with the theoretically, he comes with the Sean McVay scheme, right? That's where most of his offensive upbringing has been. Obviously, he was not in Washington with Sean McVay, but he took over directly after Sean McVay was gone. Jay Gruden was the head coach for the time that he was in Washington, right? Who McVay was under before he got hired out. So you got those similarity there, and you have the time spent with McVay. I would say that, and this is something we talked on the episode about last week, but the diversity of schemes that he's been in throughout his career, and hopefully the schemes and the potential that he can pull from, is another strength of his. On the weaknesses side, we do have pretty big questions, right, about his ability to be a play caller, because he wasn't the play caller there, and he's presumably going to be the offensive play caller in Minnesota. So I think that I would label that a weakness. I would say, just general lack of coaching experience, right? We don't really know who he's bringing to for coordinators yet. So that's an open question, and we'll address that more later in the mailbag here. But, that's a big question. And then, like last year, we saw weaknesses of a first-time play caller with Clint Kubiak, where he really struggled to adjust during games. He really struggled to kind of put together a cohesive offense that meant something. And we just don't know if he's going to be able to do that.
Really good point.
Secondarily, I think I have some questions about game management of the entire Shanahan-McVay tree. So it'd be interesting to see how that works with McConnell, right? Like, the NFC Championship game was an abomination of game management for both coaches, to be honest with you. Like, they're both fantastic schematic coaches, but we think we complained about Mike Zimmer's game management. Like, some of that stuff from Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan in that game was like, whew. So,
and they're pretty consistently bad too. Like, it's not just the NFC. Like, Sean McVay is the worst timeouts coach in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan is like the worst fourth down decision maker in the NFL. It's like funny. They're both bad at like the in-game decision making. That's so easy to make fun of them.
Guys, you're supposed to be getting folks excited here.
we were asked for weaknesses too,
Well, I will say, I do get the impression, and a lot of this is guesswork, I do get the impression that Kevin O'Connell is a lot more analytics forward than McVay is, than Kyle Shanahan are. You would kind of expect him to be a little more aggressive on the fourth down decision making, the go for it for 2 points decision making. That's kind of seemed to be one of the things that led to O'Connell being the favorite in the clubhouse back when he was being interviewed. So I do think it would not surprise me, and given the fact that Kwesi was the one who made the decision, he's Mr. Analytics, the only analytics background GM in the NFL right now, that I do think we'll see sort of an analytics friendliness. He kind of fits in the positives column. He fits like the young offensive analytics friendly guru mold that we all kind of envisioned when we decided to move on from Zimmer. Is that we want somebody, we've had all this turnover at the offensive coordinator position. We could never get the offense right. There could never be any continuity. Well, Kevin O'Connell gives us continuity, not only in that he runs the same Mike Shanahan tree offense that we're trying to run right now, and that we have been running ever since Gary Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski came over in 2019. So it gives that kind of continuity, but it will also give us continuity going forward, and whether it's Kirk Cousins or the next quarterback, it's going to be the same system every year. So that's an advantage. I think an advantage is he's going to be able to bring a lot of the Rams have a lot of good coaches on their staff, and he's going to be able to poach from them, like from their 2021 roster or front office, or the 2020 ones, or whether it's Pleasant as defensive coordinator, or Ed Donatel from the Vic Fangio tree, or whoever it might be. Those are all guys who could set him up, I think, for a lot of success hitting the ground running. And the other thing I would say that I think speaks to in his favor as a pro is he's got a really good reputation. Matt Stafford talks glowingly about him. His own players are really favorable. All the reports say he does a great job with quarterbacks. He was able to develop an undrafted free agent into somebody that the Rams kept on the roster all year, because otherwise he would have been poached. So he's a quarterback whisperer. So that's obviously a plus, being the quarterback position being as important as it is. Staley wanted him as his head coach. McVay blocked it, and as a result, the Rams win the Super Bowl. So lots of positives. I would say the downsides, the risks. Matt, you touched on the play calling, and that's hard, by the way. Like it's being able to come up with the plays on a whiteboard is a very different skill from being like, on the clock, I've got 10 seconds to get this into my quarterback. What the heck am I going to do? And being able to sequence, like Kyle Shanahan is just like a god at sequencing things and knowing exactly how to subvert expectations and be multiple and be able to prey on expectations and exploit defenses and set things up. That's really hard though. So We don't really know if he brings anything to the table as an offensive play caller, and it's a skill. So presumably there will be growing pains there because it's usually not something you just are born with.
Well, hopefully
take some practice.
Hopefully he surrounds himself with really smart people and, leans on them rather than tries to take it all on to himself, which I think was Matt Nagy's biggest mistake. Just take, he would refuse to let go and until it was too late. And I think hopefully we don't see that with Kevin. With Kev. I'm calling him Kev. I'm not calling him KOC. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I'm calling him Kev. I don't have anything to add. I think you guys really hit that really well. So let's move on to the next mailbag question. And this one comes from Jimothy at Jimbo Stimbo on Twitter. Can we expect the results of Kev's influence on the offensive scheme to translate immediately to better success? First part. Second part, where do you see the biggest opportunity for the offense to grow? It's a really good question. Two big kind of separate thoughts there, though, I think. You guys touched on this a little bit already. What do you think our offensive scheme is going to look like next year? Do you think it's going to be wildly different? Do you think it's going to be similar? And I'll let whomever feels like leading this off, please take it away.
Just to take a stab at it, I think a large part of that question is a little bit unanswered yet, particularly in the run game. It does sound like we're hiring the Broncos run game coordinator, but that's not 100% confirmed. I would say that with O'Connell coming over, you are, that Shanahan, Kubiak, wide zone system. So the offense and the offensive players have had experience in that system. And I think a lot of it will translate. Like they're going to be starting off the bat speaking the same language, right? I don't think the terminology from Kubiak to McVay is all that different. So you don't have to go from like an Air Coryell or an Earhart Perkins system where even the play calls are different, right? You have 9-8-9 as opposed to, where they call out the routes like goes or fades or posts or something like that in the Shanahan system. So I think that'll be a clean transition from that respect. I think that a lot of the stuff that he's going to run, the Vikings have some experience running. I would say that obviously the most clear areas for improvement, number one, offensive line play, right? And that matters a lot. And that will depend kind of on the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator and all that sort of stuff. So that is a little bit of an open question. But I think in the passing game, you can exploit a lot of things that Kubiak wasn't able to do. Just in terms of layering plays together, as Nick was talking about, Kyle Shanahan is the number one guy in the league, but McVay is not far behind in that respect. So, that and maximizing, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, the receiving talent you have by putting him in the best positions to succeed. I think the Rams have done that incredibly with Cooper Kupp, right? And look, like Justin Jefferson was the second most targeted player in the NFL last year. Like he had the second most receiving yards of anybody in the NFL last year. Like I don't know if he's going to produce anymore, but I think the overall passing game might improve with his guidance rather than Kubiak's.
Okay. Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do think before we hire the offensive line coach, I don't want to speak too definitively about are we going to continue to make the entire identity the wide zone game. Like when Gary Kubiak was calling the shots, they ran more wide zone than anybody. And then last year with Clint Kubiak, and I think this is something you're seeing with the McVay Shanahan tree generally, is you're starting to see a little bit of a movement away from pure wide zone, and whether that's sort of like zone counters like wind back or whether it's power. We saw a little bit more power last year, whether you're leaning into more duo and power and counter and other sort of man blocking schemes. I think that's kind of the first question, because the way the Shanahan tree kind of works is you set up the play action explosive passing game out of your run action. And the play action concepts you can do with, I personnel, CJ Ham on the field look very different from the play action you can do, shotgun 11 personnel or something. So it's hard to say necessarily. I do think and this is something that's come up a lot, is are we going to see a lot of KJ Osborne on the field? Is this the death of the 12 personnel Vikings that we've seen for the last few years? I do think we'll probably see a little bit more 11 personnel. I think the tough part about living out of 11 personnel, especially if you do it out of shotgun, the way the Rams have been doing it a lot, is that shotgun 11 personnel is a passing formation. And so when you do that, you're straining your offensive line, you're straining your pass protection, and you're taking away a lot of the things you can do as an offense because the running back can kind of only work across the formation because it's really hard to sort of take be the running back, take the handoff and then cut back. I mean, you can do it, but when you're under center, you can kind of do anything. When you are in shotgun, it just limits a lot of the things you can do as an offense. And the other thing is, when you have 3 wide receivers in there in your run blocking and you're scheming things up, and you have to have your slot receiver, traditionally a pretty small guy, taking on a linebacker, cracking down on safety, or in some cases pinning an edge defender, they're just not really equipped to do that. So you're no longer as multiple necessarily, unless you have, the way the Rams get away with it is that Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are just amazing in the run game. And Kyle Shanahan gets away with it, even though Kyle Shanahan's more of like a 21 personnel. He loves Juszczyk out there, is like he really emphasizes run gaming, run blocking from his wide receivers. Like everybody needs to be in there. So I think we could see more 11 personnel just because I think KJ Osborne and I think Justin Jefferson punch above their weight class when it comes to run blocking. But I also think like they're going to see more. You're still going to see a lot of CJ Ham because this is kind of an offense that I think would probably ideally look a little bit more like the Titans than the than Matt Stafford this year. So especially if we're keeping Kirk Cousins. So in terms of like where's the biggest opportunity for growth? I think the biggest thing in this offense was the intermediate game and the lack of intermediate game, between 10 and 20 yards. I think I just looked it up on Pro Football Focus. So of quarterbacks with more than 20% of their pass attempts in 2021, throwing deep, Cousins actually he attempted the 12th most deep shots out of 37 qualifying quarterbacks. But he only threw the 22nd most intermediate shots out of 34 qualifying quarterbacks. So nearly top 10 in terms of deep attempts, but barely anything in terms of intermediate attempts, or significantly below average. And I think something that compounded is like they just weren't able to keep drives alive. So I think the number one problem to try and cure for this new offensive coordinator and new head coach is how do we sustain drives? Because like they were very explosive. They were, I think, the 5th most explosive offense in 2021, and they always have been. I mean, that's kind of what this Kubiak offense with the I formation, with all the play action, is designed to be explosive in both the run game and in the passing game. You take some lumps because you get shots downfield and you're wide zone. Maybe you get tackled behind the line of scrimmage, but you also bounce with someone's deep. So it's all explosive, but it has to be balanced with an intermediate game. It can't just be like, either we're getting 30 yards or we're getting 3 yards, because that leads to a lot of 3 and outs. So the Vikings were second in the league in 3 and outs last year. So that's the number one thing they have to solve. And I think you can start to address it by borrowing some of the things the Rams were doing, but also just designing things a little bit better, maybe taking some cues from how the Titans do it too. So that's how I would approach it.
Very good answers, gentlemen. I'll just add that, the thing I think I'm most excited to see is how much of, when I think of the Rams offense, personally, I think of balance. I think of an offense that is willing to run the ball, especially if it's working. They're going to look for the passing game when it's working. I feel like they're very good at playing to what's working. And I think that's something that we also struggled with this year, finding what was working and then sticking with it. So I'm excited to see some of that too, see how it goes. Good question, good answers, guys. Let's keep it moving. We have 2 questions here kind of revolving around Dalvin Cook. So I'll start with a more general question, and I'll just tackle on this other question. You can kind of include it in your answer if you want to. So the first question comes from xo.nemo33 at average Vikings fan is his Twitter handle. Average Vikes fan, AVG Vikes fan. Do the Vikings switch to more of an RBBC with KOC? There it is again. If so, do we look to trade Dalvin, or would this strategy prolong his career with less of a workload? Very good question. I think I have a feeling about the answer, but that's a really good question. And then the addendum to that, coming from @Vikings Voice, will Dalvin Cook be valued in KOC's offense like he has been with Zimmer's teams? So kind of two questions that kind of bleed together there. Matt, what's your instinct about Dalvin Cook going forward?
I don't think that Dalvin Cook specifically will have the high level of value that like Mike Zimmer, I think, put on him in the offense. But if you look at Sean McVay and the way he runs his offense, he actually skews to the run a lot more than you would expect from, his reputation, I guess, as a pass game guru. And he always goes back to it in situations where they're struggling.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago they were running Todd Gurley out there, running him into the ground, basically.
So I think it somewhat depends on the player that you have in that offense. And when you do have a special player like Dalvin Cook, I think he's going to get a heavy workload. Now, I would expect there to be a bit more of a load management aspect to it, to be honest with you, where, we would have games, especially this past year, where it didn't make much sense to me because we knew Dalvin Cook was playing on a hurt ankle and he's still getting the 25, 30 touches a game. I think, to help Dalvin, especially if he gets dinged up during the season, we do have a serviceable player in Alex Madison behind him, to spell him for a few drives a game and keep him more fresh throughout the game. Now, if you want to talk about like old school football guys, right, there are some people who would argue that you need to keep a running back in the game to help him with the rhythm in the game. I'm not sure how true that exactly is. In terms of the value of Dalvin Cook, I'll
say it gets more debatable with every passing year. And that's coming from a guy who, genuinely thinks that way.
Yeah.
But I think it is debatable.
In terms of the value of Dalvin Cook on Dalvin Cook's contract, I think, and you maybe don't agree with this, but I think you might even agree that Dalvin Cook is not necessarily worth the value of his contract, right? So if the Vikings were to make the decision to trade him with a quote unquote analytics forward, offense and maybe a quote unquote pass first offense, it wouldn't shock me. But based on what we've seen from, the Sean McVay system and the Kyle Shanahan system, right? They have a heavy emphasis on the run game, and the run game is kind of the foundation of all of the stuff that they do in the pass game with play action and that sort of thing. So I would not expect a Dalvin Cook trade with the new regime coming in.
Good answers. Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say if they're still a wide zone team, I expect them to actually rely on Cook just as much, if not even more. I mean, this is, I mentioned the Titans, like Derrick Henry is kind of the identity of that offense. And when you have a back as talented as Cook is at setting up his blocks in wide zone and picking the right gap and just shifting gears and going full throttle and then just making guys miss once he's through the hole. Like that is Dalvin's game. If they wanted to switch to more duo power, Madison probably brings a little bit more oomph to, pushing the pile. And he might be able to like have more burst through the hole. I mean, Dalvin is still a really good runner for like power or duo or whatever. I just think, if this is going to be the same McVay offense, like you would see them riding Dalvin like a bell cow just as much. So I don't necessarily think they're going to devalue him unless there's a dramatic shift in the run game or they hire like if they hired Mike Munchak, I would expect them probably to move a little bit away from the wide zone stuff. And maybe that could, potentially maybe they would decide to move on from Dalvin. As far as his like what they could get for a trade, he's still got his contract. He's not cheap, but I also think in league circles he's highly respected as a top 5 running back. And I think that's right when he's healthy. And when he's healthy is a big asterisk. I don't know. You could probably, I would guess you would be able to get like a second rounder, maybe. Yeah. Like Jay Ajayi was like what, a third rounder or fourth
it's not
rounder?
going to be a first.
No. I mean, you're trading for a 26-year-old running back who's already hit 1,000 rushes in his career. So he's a talented player, but it would be like a win now move for a team that needs a running back. So, and you're seeing less and less of that in the NFL. So, maybe a third rounder. You could maybe get a second rounder in the right scenario, and I would do that. I think I'm excited about Wangwu's upside. I'm excited about Madison. I think Madison's a starting caliber type of running back, not in the same stratosphere as Dalvin, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of other variables that go into the running game success besides just the running back, and that tends to be overemphasized in old school NFL circles. So I would make that trade, but I also think I would doubt Kevin O'Connell is the kind of guy who, if he wants to come in here and do a McVay type offense, that he's going to trade Dalvin. So I expect Dalvin to be kind of just the same bell cow.
I agree. I think I lean more towards Nick's answer on this one. I will say the only thing, whatever we end up doing at running back, short term and long term, whatever it is, even if it's an RBBC or like more analyst or whatever it is, I definitely don't want to end up like the Bills or the Eagles, where there's no alpha in the room and there's nobody who's really particularly talented either, to sort of drive the machine. That's the only thing I don't want, whatever we end up doing. And I think we're starting to underrate Dalvin a little bit as a fan base. It seems like that's kind of what's happening lately. And it's kind of a bummer to me because I don't think there's too many Vikings people in the organization or players who would deny how much he does for us. So a little disappointed about that. But I do agree that with each passing year and with every passing injury, that contract does get a little bit harder to stomach. It's a reality. So, and I love the guy, but it is true. Good answers, guys. Do you have anything you want to tack on there, Matt?
No, I don't think so. And like I said, it depends on how he wants to run it. If they kind of come in with sports science load management thing and be more progressive there, I think that might be the reason you see it, rather than him not thinking Dalvin is like the best option at running back, right?
Sure.
I think Dalvin's clearly the best option at running back on the team.
I'd also be surprised if we didn't draft a running back, because I think Madison's in his last year of his contract. I think he is. And Nwangwu, I like the idea of Nwangwu, but I didn't see a lot from him when we finally did start giving him the ball.
We've got extra late round picks, right? Just draft some guy who runs a 4.3 in the 6th round or something and beat Kyle Shanahan.
I mean, that's you're half kidding, I think, but I honestly wouldn't mind seeing something.
I mean, like the way I presented it as a joke, but that's a serious take.
I agree.
It sounds like a joke, but it's real.
Yeah, it's
for what it's worth. Modkins, the guy they hired out of Denver, has a great reputation as a running back developer. So you get him in the same room with Nwangwu's traits. I think that could be an exciting long-term upside.
I'm not bagging on Nwangwu again on this show. Okay, I like the guy.
No, please do, Greg. Please do.
I'm wishing nothing but success for him. It was definitely not. He needs work. That's for sure. Okay, cool. Let's keep this thing moving. We're making good time here, but we do have quite a bit more to get through. So let's start talking about this section. There's a lot of unanswered stuff here. It's going to be mostly conjecture, but it's fun to talk about. So let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of staff we think we're going to put together. And the first question in this section comes to us from I like this one, at Skull_Squatch.
Great
solid handle. Which available coach or former player can finally fix our offensive line? We don't even have to be great. Just bring us some sweet, sweet mediocrity. Amen, brother. Who's our saving? Who's our savior here? Who's going to come and save us? Matt,
there's one name here. it's
one
Mike
name.
Munchak.
One name, only name.
It's
Mike Munchak. A legendary offensive line coach with the Steelers forever. Was stolen over by the Broncos and was with Vic Fangio the last couple of years, and has connections both to Curtis Modkins and to Ed Donatel. So if they do end up staffing those two guys, and those two seem to be both the leaders in the clubhouse for the running back position / run game coordinator and the defensive coordinator, those are two higher ups in the coaching staff. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Munchak is the guy they bring in. There have been no reports there. It's not necessarily a great fit. The reason Mike Munchak is on the market is because Nathaniel Hackett came into Denver and said, no, I want an outside zone specialist. This guy isn't a scheme fit. Munchak comes, traditionally with the Steelers, he's more of an inside zone kind of guy, mix things up with duo power, but like
bruising, I think of those Steelers lines, man.
Mike McDaniel, keep your grubby little hands off of our Mike Munchak and we'll be okay.
Give me some big fat guards who can move people, man. Come on. I love it.
The only other option I would accept, and this is kind of a pie in the sky answer, and we'd have to bring him in as like offensive coordinator or whatever, would be Bill Callahan. But I'm not even sure we can give him a promotion to take him away from Cleveland. So that's.
Although I'm not sure how Cleveland managed to steal him away from Washington in the first place. Like Cleveland managed to do it. So if Cleveland can pry him away, maybe the Vikings can too. I don't know.
And O'Connell has worked with Callahan at 2 separate stops. Well, he played under him at one stop and worked with him in Washington. So,
Interesting. All right, let's keep this.
Munchak, though, is the free agent, and he developed Villanueva from an undrafted guy to like a plus tackle. He developed Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles was looking like a draft bust. Then he came in. Now Garrett Bowles looks like one of the most promising young left tackles in the game. So, and those are just like 2 prominent examples of all the other Pro Bowlers, all pros that he's had. And he's just a legend in NFL circles. So, it's kind of like it's now that Rauscher is off to I think Jacksonville. And Aaron Cromer, who worked with O'Connell a lot in LA, is off to Buffalo. I kind of feel like the options are like Munchak or like some nobody. So
it's kind of like all or the other guys who I would have considered got hired already, to be honest with you. So I'm at a loss otherwise.
Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Actually, this is a great piggyback on that. Just very quickly, are we losing out on any position coaches as a result of having to wait for KOC? And I think the answer is very obviously, yes, we are. There's people getting snapped up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they have been doing these interviews in parallel.
Oh, sorry, that was also from at Vikings Voice. I just want to add that. Sorry.
Yeah, like we had a chance to get Patrick Graham as our defensive coordinator, and he just chose McDaniels in Las Vegas over us. Like we did the interviews there, and I'm sure they probably would have had a chance to bring in Cromer if they wanted it. Or they probably would have had a chance to retain Rauscher if that was the plan. But it sounds like Kevin O'Connell kind of has his own plan for his staff, and it's just kind of being leaked, or they're doing interviews and it's still a process. But like, I don't know. There aren't necessarily guys. Honestly, we probably, by delaying ourselves, we probably I think of more of like losing out on interviewing Nathaniel Hackett. Like Denver hired him up before Vikings really got a chance. And it was reported that Adolfo-Mensah's he was one of Adolfo-Mensah's shortlist guys. So that's one guy. That's kind of the only guy that comes to mind when I think of guys we missed out on. I don't think of it as much for the positional coaches, just because I feel like that's in flux so much. And, I feel like guys are willing to be a little bit more patient there. Like they're not rushing to get things locked up necessarily. So,
yeah, I would be kind of interested to see what the relationship would be with some of the in-house coaches that have left, like Rauscher, or apparently Carl Scott today got hired by Seattle. If O'Connell was able to be in the building and kind of be around and have conversations with those guys, because Carl Scott was not a Zimmer guy, right? He was a Nick Saban Alabama guy. And I think he would have been a really good addition to keep, just based on the work that he did, in his 1 year. But the guy who I really, really want to keep is McCardell, and he hasn't been reported to go anywhere yet. So I'm fingers crossed that we can keep him. Other than that, I'm pretty sure the real answer is O'Connell has a list of guys, and maybe, there were people he wanted to reach out to that we've missed out on, but it is what it is. I think if you're not willing to hire a coach who made the Super Bowl, because of the potential to lose out on assistants, that's a bad process. So I'd rather have it this way than the other way around.
That's a mistake. I agree. Definitely agreed on that. Anything else you'd like to add to that? Okay. Let's keep it going here. We're on a rhythm. Okay, the next 2 questions that I want to focus on are both pretty similar. They have to do with the defensive side of the ball. We haven't talked about that much yet. And honestly, it's the elephant in the room, right? We're going to lose a lot of players. We didn't play very well defensively off and on throughout the year. Defense is probably the biggest question mark we have going into next season, and it'll be talked to death at some point. Currently, we don't know what direction we're going to go, though. And here's the questions. First question is from Friend of the show at Nose on a Rug 17 on Twitter. What are your opinions on potential DCs, defensive coordinators, and what our defense would look like under those options, especially if the hire would mean a change to a 3-4 defense? And piggybacking on that section of the question from at Viking DM1, if the Vikings do switch to a 3-4 defense, because we picked the defensive coordinator who does run that kind of defense, which veterans on the roster do you think would fill what positions, if any? It's a really good addendum to that. Other question. So take it away, guys. What are some of our potential DC? There's a big name out there right now. Ed Donatel is the latest name today as of this recording. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, just to throw the names out first, right? The names I've seen connected to the Vikings are Ed Donatel, Aubrey Pleasant, who's the Detroit defensive backs coach and defensive pass game coordinator. Sean Desai has been mentioned, and Mike Pettin has been mentioned. Wink Martindale got hired by the Giants today. Obviously, Patrick Graham already got hired by the Raiders, so they're kind of out. So it's those four guys. Nick, do you have anybody else there that you want to throw in?
Anthony Weaver,
right? The Ravens defensive line guy. Of those options, I mean, it's kind of, I tweeted today that it's like literally it was Ed Donatel, and then he was getting hired somewhere else, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm off of that, and then I sold myself on Aubrey Pleasant, and now Ed Donatel's back in the mix. Like, what are we doing here, right? So it is kind of I've been able to sell myself on the guys. I'm all the way out on Mike Pettin. Do not want any of that. So that's number one.
I think we're agreed on
Aubrey Pleasant, I really like in terms of the communication and talking to players and teaching players mold. That's who he is as a coach. That's what I believe he would bring to the organization. Obviously, he doesn't have defensive play calling experience unless you count the Senior Bowl where he was elevated to the Lions defensive coordinator for that role. They were one of the two teams coaching. So he got a little bit of experience there. That's a question. Ed Donatel is a senior Vic Fangio lieutenant, right? Like Vic Fangio would be the dream as defensive coordinator. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem like that's likely. If it's Donatel behind him, you would hope that he's been with Fangio for like 10 years. So that's through the 49ers, through the Bears, through the Broncos. He's done a really fantastic job in terms of defensive backs. Like they have produced quite a number of defensive backs and kind of revitalized a couple careers, especially if you remember like Prince Amukamara with the Bears. Back in the day, like he played really well under Fangio after being kind of washed up for a little while there. So, I definitely like that idea of Donatel bringing the Fangio system in there. It seems to be in vogue in the NFL right now, but it's really good for a reason. He's been really good for a reason. So we'd hope that kind of rubs off and he's not the Paul Gunther to Mike Zimmer, right? Which I would be a little bit concerned about with him, I think. Just because you don't know where he's at in terms of calling plays and teaching the defense compared to Fangio. If Fangio is the architect and he's been on it the whole time, there's a little bit of uncertainty. But again, there's uncertainty with everybody. To answer the second part of the question, moving to a 3-4, I think obviously both Dalvin Tomlinson and Michael Pierce fit very well in that. James Lynch actually, I think, would be really good as a quote unquote 3-4 defensive end. That's pretty much the role he played in college. So I think that works there. I think you could fit Armand Watts in there. He has the flexibility to do that on the defensive line. Daniil Hunter played 3-4 defensive end ostensibly at LSU. He's athletic enough to drop into coverage. Obviously, you don't want to ask him to do that, but like the role of an edge rusher in that defense pretty much stays the same. You might just ask them to drop into coverage at some point, and like he's fluid enough to do that. DJ Wanham also probably has the movement skills to do that. I don't want DJ Wanham starting at edge rusher, so it's like whatever, man. And the guys going down the list, like Kenny Willekes is in trouble if we move to a 3-4, right? Because he does not have that kind of movement skills, I don't think. And he's kind of a hand in the dirt 4-3 defensive end a little bit more. But I think a lot of guys have most of the flexibility. Like Eric Hendricks is a great off-ball linebacker. He'll be a great off-ball linebacker no matter what you ask him to do. In the secondary, it doesn't really matter, right? It's more the front that matters. So I think our personnel would adapt pretty well, and we'd be able to fill in the pieces that don't, because we already have needs in the guys that don't fit anyway. So
it used to be a huge distinction because one, like base defense used to actually mean the majority of your defensive snaps. Nowadays, everybody's in nickel almost 2/3 of the time or more. And some teams are in nickel more than 90% of the time. So a nickel 4-3 and a nickel 3-4 aren't actually all that different. But in your base defense, it's substantially different, and you have to draft differently for the two. That said, with the proliferation of odd fronts to combat wide zone, like we were already seeing Okie fronts, we were seeing bear fronts last year from the Vikings. I think that's kind of why they brought in Michael Pierce. I would say there's a lot of differences between a 4-3 and a 3-4. I think the biggest one, though, is that your zero tech nose guard in a 3-4 is a different kind of player than your one technique 4-3 nose guard. And just that, one is like 350 pounds and the other one is like Vince Wilfork, like 350 pounds, has to be able to two gap, or theoretically be able to two gap, even if it's a one gap 3-4 technique, which is what you see more nowadays. And that's kind of what you see with Fangio from that whole tree, that coaching tree. Michael Pierce is more of a zero technique. I mean, he's capable of obviously playing one tech and a 4-3. But if they wanted to shift, and if they were playing a team that comes out with like a lot of tight ends, or heavier personnel where you're playing more like the Ravens, where you're playing more of an actual 3-4. I think Michael Pierce probably benefits from doing more of that stuff compared to Dalvin Tomlinson. I think he's probably a little heavy right now to be like a 4-eye or a 3 technique guy. But that's kind of, if you're doing the gap and a half stuff where like the nose and like the 3 or the 4-eye is already 2 gapping a little bit, then he can do that. The rest of the stuff, like right now, they don't really have like your prototypical like 5 tech for like a 3-4, like your JJ Watt or like your Calais Campbell or whoever. But I mean, they don't really have. I guess you could put Danielle Hunter in that role, but like I don't know.
I think Danielle Hunter is the only edge rusher we have. He's the only edge rusher we have. So
you can make it work. And they mix it up. So I'm not too. They have the personnel to make it work. I think, however they do it, and I think either way, when you're nickel, it's not as much of a big difference.
I'm going to throw something else at you guys, though, because I'm enjoying thinking about this. Does it even matter, I guess, is what I'm going to ask you, because we really have an opportunity at this point to rebuild that defense, and we're going to have to. We don't have a lot of corners under contract. We don't have, we have a lot of question marks currently on defense, and that's actually kind of a good thing if we do decide to switch to a new type of system or whatever. Or we have a defense coordinator who wants to play a different way, wants to get smaller, faster, whatever it is. We kind of have an opportunity right now, don't we?
Yeah, with what they want to play and the guys we have, it doesn't matter at all, because like Michael Pierce played for the Ravens. They run a 3-4 defense, right? Dalvin Tomlinson played for the Giants in the 3-4 that they ran a lot of Okie fronts under Patrick Graham. He played for freaking Alabama, which has always been 3-4 and will always be 3-4, I'm pretty sure. So like both of those guys can 2 gap, and that's like the difference in technique if you're running a traditional 3-4. Now, a Fangio system 3-4, like Nick said, I want to clarify, is usually a 1 gap system, and you're not asking guys to 2 gap a lot. So at that point, like you're just in a different spot than you are, right, on the defensive line. So it's not really an issue at all. Again, the coverage flexibility from the edge rushers, like a little bit more coverage flexibility than zone blitz stuff, but again, we have 1 edge rusher. We don't have any more than that on the roster that I think are viable. So
one who we might trade. I mean, it's possible.
The one thing I'll say is, like, in the draft, you can get like tiny guys for a 3-4. Like, it's not as big of a deal if you got like a 220 pounder, 230 pounder in the draft. You're like, is this guy even is this guy an off-ball linebacker or an edge rusher? You can make those guys work as like a 9 tech and like your wide. I mean, you can do that with a 4-3 too, but like, I think those guys can fit in a little bit more when they don't necessarily have to put their hand in the dirt. And at the same time, if you are running a pure 3-4 and you plan to actually use a lot of those looks, having those guys who are like kind of tweeners, inside out guys with the inside outside flexibility, who kind of like flirt between, like 270 pounders who they're 5 tech, but they could also do like 3 or 4 eye or stuff. That versatility, I think, is a little more valuable in the 3-4. So it probably affects maybe a little bit of what their prototypes are looking for in the draft. So
whatever happens, the defense is going to look completely different to us in 2 years. It's going to be a completely different group. That's the reality. Good stuff, guys. I'd like to keep us moving here because we do have a lot of really good questions we haven't gotten to yet, including some really fun stuff. So I'm going to throw a question at you guys that's coming from me. And I want you to answer honestly, because whatever your answer is, it's what we're going to go with, okay? Do you really want to talk about Kirk Cousins still?
I put it out on Twitter that I was just like doing a permanent moratorium on Kirk Cousins talk. I'm not, it's all been said before. I have nothing to add the conversation.
Answer the question. Do you want to talk about him tonight? Yes or no?
How about we make a promise that we'll do a Kirk Cousins episode once we've got all the people in place.
I like that.
Try to make a decision before free agency starts.
Okay, apologies.
The questions, we appreciate them, but
we appreciate them. Apologies to everyone who sent us Kirk Cousins stuff. I have absolutely no interest in talking about it. So let's move on. Okay, let's do one of our fun questions here. I love the way this question is phrased, and I really hope we play the game. Rank all the quarterback prospects that are coming out in the draft on a scale of butts to not butts. Okay, and that question comes to us from a friend of the show, Randy Esquite on Twitter.
Yes, quite.
Thank you. Yes, quite. I didn't read that right. That was 4 M's on that Twitter handle. It's very important you get that right. That guy's a funny follow. Please do it.
Esquite.
Esquite. I can't believe I read that. That's funny. All right, so here's the prospects. All right. Oh, and then someone's trolling me, I think specifically, and wants to hear me pick Kellen Mond out of that group, who I would take over Kellen Mond out of this group as well. And that question came to us from @Skull or whatever. I feel targeted, but I'm going to answer the question anyway. Okay, QE prospects. I'm going to list off the names, and then you guys, I'll list the name off, and then you guys just tell me butts, not butts. Okay? We'll have plenty of time to talk about these guys, and let's be real. None of us have actually scouted these guys yet. So this is just pure gut instinct, what you know about the player right now, in this moment. Butts, not butts. Kenny Pickett.
Small hands. I mean butts. Small butts.
Butts.
Butts. Agreed. And then we'll just go in that order, exactly like that. Matt, Nick. Okay. Matt Corral.
Not butts, kind of.
Butts.
I'm going to go with
Kirk Cousins is our court quarterback, so there's a threshold here.
I'm going to go.
If you can't be better than Kirk Cousins, then you're butts.
Okay, I'm going to go not butts on Matt Corral. I think he's got potential. Malik Willis.
Not butts. Also, no. First of all, I want to preface all of this. None of these are better than the 5 quarterbacks that were taken in the first round last year. Like the first round last year's draft had 5 better quarterbacks than every single person we are talking about right now. So it's a relative scale.
I 100% agree. Nick.
Butts. I think the Josh Allens and the Herberts and all these guys have warped our realities and made us forget about the Jamarcus Russells and the Ryan Leaf. So butts.
I just can't believe we're also doing that with Joe Burrow and Kenny Pickett. Like, what are we doing?
I'm going to go not butts on Malik Willis, but that's subject to change. Desmond Ridder.
He's the one I feel most firmly not butts, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I was going to say butts. I think
butts.
They're all butts. Spoiler.
Butts. Carson Strong.
Butts. Very butts.
Nick.
I could be talked into not butts, but I'm going to stick with butts.
Carson Strong can't move, man. It's bad.
He can throw it real deep, but he can't do anything else. I'm going to say butts. Sam Howell.
Matt Stafford can't move. You don't have to be able to be, Lamar Jackson out there.
Kirk
Cousins can't move, and well, no, we're not talking about Kirk Cousins' butts.
You brought him up twice now. Sam Howell.
Sam Darnold. Butts.
Butts.
I'm going not butts, but that's only based on last season, not this season. He was pretty butts this season. Okay, last name on the list, and honestly, I have no fucking clue who this is. Bailey Zapp.
Bailey Zappi broke the all-time record for passing yardage and passing touchdowns in NCAA, but
take that, Case Keenum.
Yeah.
Butts.
Well,
Butts.
Burrow,
Butts.
Apparently he beat Burrow because I guess Burrow beat Keenum, but yeah.
Complete butts, that guy. Butts Zappy.
Butts all the way down, man.
This is a butts class. This is not the class to go in on. I got to be honest, but we'll talk about that another time. All right. I really enjoyed that section. Thank you so much.
And Kellen Mond is butts too. So
Yeah, Kellen Mond.
Oh, okay.
to answer Skoll or whatever's question, they're all equally butts.
Well, I disagree. I disagree on that only because we haven't seen him play.
We saw him play. We saw plenty enough of him play.
Yes, right. We saw him step onto
Week
the
16.
field in negative 15.
Try and throw a pick six and then get yanked off.
Throw
the
one
field.
pass, and that's why you should sink his entire career. Yes, I completely agree. That's perfectly reasonable from Vikings fans, as always.
Exactly.
I would take him genuinely, honestly, over most of the guys on this list, except for right now, my instinct, Malik Willis and Matt Corral, I think would probably be.
I would for sure take him over I'm not going to like Carson Strong. Period. I would take him over Strong and Bailey Zappi.
Yeah. And that's it. Interesting.
I don't know about the others.
Okay.
You need to do some convincing.
I'll save that for another day. Okay, let's keep it moving. That was fun. We have a lot of really fun questions here in a sort of a grab bag section. So I'm just going to start with the one that may engender the most debate. And if you will allow me, I'd like to take the lead on answering this question too, because I've been thinking about it all day, and I'm the movie guy on this podcast. I don't get to show that side of myself very often. So if you'll give me that
would you like me to ask it, Greg?
Yes, please, Matt. Please.
All right. So fantastic question. Kurt at Kurt with 2 C's asks, you have to cast a coming of age of the last summer before college, right? The stereotypical movie with the aging vets of the Vikings. Who plays each role? Your cast is Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks, and Harrison Smith.
Great question. All right. I've been sinking my teeth into this all afternoon. At first, I thought I would, start with just giving you a comp movie, but I think that's too narrowing. So most of these movies, there's main thematic characters, right? And that's what the question's about. Obviously, the two most important characters are always two characters who have been best friends all through high school. They've been together. They've been tight, and they realize that with college, approaching, their relationship is going to change irrevocably. That's the revelation, and usually it's triggered by some kind of event. Maybe it's a big party where one of them finally gets with the pixie girl that they've dreamed about all these years, and we'll talk about her in a second. So there's two obvious candidates for the best friend characters who have been together this whole time, who are about to potentially face some kind of breakup or some kind of, destruction of their norms. Okay. And that's Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen. I mean, those are the obvious best friends, the stars of the show, getting a little older. They're potentially moving on, who knows?
I have strong takes here. I'll let you finish, Greg.
One of them might move away, So that's definitely my vote for that archetype. And then, of course, I mentioned her already, the pixie girl. Pixie guy. Excuse me. This is not gender specific. The pixie character that the two leads. Sometimes they both have a crush on them. Sometimes only one has a crush, but the other gets kind of jealous that they're following that crush. That for me has got to be Eric Kendricks because of his beautiful hair. He's definitely.
You can just see stepping out of the car, flicking the hair with the flow.
We literally, and we've literally, we've seen it in commercials. We've seen this guy. We know that this is the right pick for the pixie girl or pixie guy as well. In this case, he literally is a guy. Okay, now every teenage, angsty film of this type, it's got to have a bully character. Okay, it's got to have a character who fucks up the party or does something to really, really like destroy the balance of everything. You know, it was already shaky, and then the bully does something that really screws everything up. Obviously, the bully on the Minnesota Vikings is Harrison Smith. Come on, I mean, this guy, and you can absolutely see Harrison Smith literally playing this role. You know, showing up at a party and like picking a fight with some nerd like Kirk Cousins. So that's definitely my bully. And I could not figure out how to categorize Pat P, and I've taken up enough of the floor here on this question. So I hand it to you guys. Where does Pat P fit? And do you disagree or agree with all of my takes?
I'm pretty close to Greg, so I'll go pretty quick here. Obviously, the main character, the number one main character to me is Adam Thielen, right? He's the Minnesota kid. He's the local kid. He's going off to school. He's having a good time. His best friend, a total freaking nerd, Kirk Cousins, right, is, he's going to Harvard or something, and Thielen's going more to the local community college, like the local state school or whatever.
Mankato State.
And they're definitely upset that they're breaking up, and they want to have a good time, but Kirk's all nervous about it, right? He is definitely the character like, oh, we're going to get in so much trouble for doing this. Like, that's 100% Kirk Cousins, right?
Yeah.
And then I had Harrison Smith kind of as like the older brother who's kind of a little bit, of a the bad boy older brother who's like cool and like buys you beer and stuff. I had him there.
All right.
Maybe a little bit condescending, but Eric Kendricks, love interest, clearly the hair. I mean, how can you not cast him there? And then Patrick Peterson for me was like the friend who had gone off to school a year before, is real cool, like wants to hang out and show everybody the ropes. Like, that's who Patrick Peterson is.
I got to give you some applause for that one. I hadn't even considered that character. That's solid. Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, all I'll say is I do not want to watch a movie where Kirk Cousins is the protagonist. I just have zero interest in ever watching that movie.
Oh, see, I don't have him as the protagonist. He's like he's the best friend who's nervous about everything.
I have Kirk Cousins as like Ed Helms in The Hangover. I have him as like the awkward guy who's constantly getting into like hijinks because he's like the straight man who's like a great plays well with all like the crappy situations he gets into.
Yeah.
Thielen is the everyman. Everybody, like in both Vikings football and in this movie, he's like the protagonist we all sympathize with. I like the other stuff you said. I think EK is more like the party guy, and Pat Pete is like, quarterback of the football team, popular guy, everybody loves him, Mr. Cool. So I don't know. I would watch this movie provided Kirk Cousins is not like I guess you could make it work if he's like the awkward everyman, and like that's kind of American Pie. Like you could do Kirk in that role.
He's the Michael Cera, the super bad. Like that's kind of
there you go.
Yeah. Great,
but not in like a funny way, just in like an actually awkward way. Like season 1 of The Office, not season 3.
Thank you so much, Kurt with 2 C's. That made almost the entire podcast experience worth it for me. I enjoyed that all afternoon. I mean, I've enjoyed speaking with you guys every week, but you know what I mean. That was just a great question. Okay, let's move on to the next question here. This is also a really good question from another Olsen. Do we know this Olsen?
I do not.
Really? Oh, wow. Crazy. All right. As this is coming from Olsen D1, Derek Olsen on Twitter, as stated in the Levitard show interview with Justin Jefferson, it is apparently legal to just grab and take wild ducks since it's not theft. I had no idea about this, by the way. Thoughts on this topic? Apparently you can just take wild ducks.
I would like to preface this by this podcast does not provide any sort of legal advice at all. Nick, you're a lawyer. We'll have at it.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting you mentioned this. Would you believe that the very first law school property case you read in your first year of law school actually is all about how do you define possession and ownership of wild animals? So
really?
Yeah, true story. It's an old case called Pearson v. Post. I won't bore you with all the details, but like in the 1700s America, there was like this, people would go on big hunting expeditions. It was like a big event. And this guy Post was tracking this fox with his, hunting party. And he was on the chase and he was on the hunt. And this other guy Pearson came along. And while Post was trying to catch and capture and have the fox as his, skin it for his trophy and mount it on his wall or whatever, Pearson comes along and snacks up the fox and apparently this was such a big deal that they took it to, the New York Supreme Court or whatever, and got into this big rich people in the 1700s. This is their life. They hunt for sport and then they sue for sport. So goes to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court of New York decides, no, the winner here is Pearson. He was the one who actually took possession of the wild fox, so he does not have to pay any damages. He's the winner. This is the seminal property law case that everybody reads in their first year of law school. The first case you read in your property class. It was the very first case I read 10 years ago when I was first starting law school. So yes, you can take a duck? You can take wild animals and it becomes possession is yours. Once you take, like if you just took a squirrel from the park or whatever, like if you took the squirrel and made it your pet, somebody couldn't take the squirrel because then it's your pet. Like you've actually taken possession of the squirrel. Same thing with the duck. If you actually take the duck, then it's your duck. It's your duck now. So if somebody else comes along, you can sue them and be like, no, that's my duck. I had him first. But until somebody does, the government doesn't own the ducks. They're wild animals. There's an old Latin term for it that they use, but yeah. So you can go to the park and you can steal ducks. Yes, this is.
I'm genuinely shocked right now.
Yeah, so,
I didn't know you could just grab wild animals. I thought they were like protected in some way. This is nuts.
I mean, if it's like an endangered species, we're talking something. But if you're just like taking ducks, yeah, like again, not legal advice, but you can have as many ducks as you want.
You might run afoul of protected species laws, like
a foul.
So you did that on purpose. Tell me you did that on purpose.
Oh,
that was good. That was good, Matt. Wow, that's a great. I really didn't know that. Great.
I'm glad you asked, Derek.
Yes, thank you very much, Derek Olson. Not related. Wow. Okay. I don't know. We've had some really good ones here. We might still have even topping questions here to follow. And I'm in a groove right now. Let's finish this up. We've got 2 more questions I want to pitch to you guys. This question already caused a great Twitter debate. All right, but let's answer it anyway. What position would a trained gorilla play? Think about that for a second. And that's coming from Maurice Morth at Young Mit Dem Ball on Twitter. That's another good handle. Guys,
there's a right and wrong answer here.
Well, obviously skill positions are out. Gorillas are, they're way too awkward.
They do not have the range of motion to high point a ball, to catch the ball. They're not going to, you're not going to send them downfield. But,
they'd probably crush the ball when they caught it. That's, you can't have that. You'd be going through balls left and right. So it's got to be.
I don't think you want them in the back 7. You're talking about a 600-pound animal with, like 3 foot long or 4 foot long arms or whatever. So I really feel like the answer here is either you put him as like as a defensive tackle, a nose tackle, and just line him up and he will bowl over and swallow the ball carrier every single play. Or I think even better, potentially, it depends really on how well you train this gorilla. I think running back is the correct option because nobody is tackling a gorilla in the open field. Now there are downsides to running back gorilla. Like one, all you need to do is get the gorilla on its knee to be down. And a gorilla runs on all 4. So if you're already holding the ball in one hand, and that's another question too, can the gorilla, is the gorilla going to have a fumbling problem? But if you can train the gorilla to hold the ball and to like gallop on 3 legs or whatever, nobody's going to be tackling that beast, and it's going to be an automatic touchdown every play.
Isn't vision going to be
an automatic touchdown every play is better than having a nose guard because you can just throw quick screens.
He might be running into his own
you can neutralize the gorilla on the defensive line. You cannot neutralize gorilla Barry Sanders.
If he's running into the back of his own offensive lineman, can he really be an effective running back though?
He's a trained gorilla, he's not gonna have elite vision or anything.
Okay, how good is the training? Like
this is why you have gorilla triple option quarterback, not running back. There's 1 fewer exchange, so there's less ability to screw it up. Right?
These are very
not tackling this guy. Are you going to try to tackle a gorilla? I'm not tackling a gorilla. You couldn't pay me any amount of money to tackle a gorilla. He's scoring a touchdown every time as long as he knows which way to run.
Well, these are some smart gorillas. These are some very smart gorillas that you guys are supposing.
Real ball carrier.
I think though that the easiest answer and truly the best answer is defensive tackle. I mean, I feel like a gorilla coming up the middle, providing pressure on the quarterback, Stop shutting down rushing lanes just by existing. I don't think you could do anything. And it's much more in line with the gorilla's natural instinct to dominate.
I'm not blocking a gorilla either, by the way. I'm not trying to attack him. I'm not trying to block him.
Once he gets his hands on you, you're done as an offensive lineman. I feel like defensive tackle is
the problem with gorilla defensive lineman, which I'll admit is a great second best answer, but you can get the ball quickly away from the gorilla. And then the gorilla is taken, like Aaron Donald, really good. But you can just get the ball away from him. You can triple team him. You can do things. Sure. I mean, triple teaming a gorilla is doable.
Triple team a gorilla.
It's 600 pounds. You know, you get 300-pound offensive linemen, and yes, you can triple team a gorilla.
Two of those guys with one arm and then bite the other.
Alternatively, you can throw quick screens. You can do the quick game. You get rid of the ball very quickly, and there's a way to scheme around the gorilla. You cannot scheme around a gorilla running back. There's nothing you can do.
I don't know, man.
Answer is ball carrier.
We're gonna have to disagree on this. Matt, do you have a deciding vote here?
I said ball carrier, triple option quarterback.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you win. All right. Well, I've been outvoted. Great question. We have another gorilla question to end this section with and to end our mailbag with. And I think it's only appropriate to say once and for all on the Kindred Skols podcast, was Harambe murdered? Or was it just Harambe?
Man, Greg, you got to work on your pronunciation, man.
Justifiable homicide. Give me a break, man. At Purple Buckeye sent us that one. Quick answer. Was Harambe murdered or was it justifiable homicide?
I mean, legally, Harambe isn't a human person, so under common law jurisdiction.
Why? Because he's a wild animal in your crazy world where wild animals can just be imprisoned at will.
It's just a different set of laws for animals compared to human beings. So, no, it was not homicide. The ethical question of whether the zoo did the right thing and the mother's culpability of letting the kid down into the moat or whatever, that's a whole other debate. But yeah,
Matt, what's your opinion?
My opinion is rest in peace, Harambe. No tears, only dreams now.
My opinion, and this is I genuinely feel this way. I think that gorillas are people. And I think Harambe was murdered. And
Which is why they need a fantastic triple option quarterback. Thank you, Jake.
I should have given them more credit because I think they're very smart too. So maybe the option quarterback. I'd like to see it. I would love to see it. I'm not going to lie. Guys, let's do a quick Super Bowl pick and then we're out of here. Who do you like in the Super Bowl?
Bengals.
Rams. I'm taking the Bengals because I'm cheering with my heart this year. I want
Matt Stafford throws a or multiple critical picks. Rams lose.
He definitely flirted with it in the NFC Championship game.
I would.
Not I'm rooting against Stanford. Bengals I think are the underdog, and so they're fun to root for.
No, I think the betting favorite should be the Rams.
Look, I'm with you guys.
Let's the Bengals. Fun fact: the Bengals were they had the second lowest odds to win the Super Bowl in the preseason. Like they were tied with the Jets. It was 1 in 150 odds. So quite a Cinderella story if they pull this off.
Yeah, go Bengals. Matt, where can people find you on Twitter?
Find me at Fries Football.
Nick, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Nick Olson NFL.
Excellent. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at You've Been Gregged with 3 J's. You can find us as a group at Kindred Skols on Twitter. We are available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.
5 stars only.
5 stars only, please. We really need your help. Appreciate it.
Even if you disagree with our Harambe takes, our gorilla
even if you hate my handlebar mustache, I don't care. Please give us 5 stars. You can also find us on YouTube by searching for Kindred Skols. Guys, this was super fun. And
thank you for all the great questions. Sorry we didn't get through all of them.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic questions, everybody.
It ended up taking up. We ended up having even more fun with it than we thought, so we had to drop a couple. But we very much appreciate it, and I think we'll do it again someday. So, digital hugs. Anything? Final words, guys?
Goodbye. I love you.
Goodbye, I love you.
Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score the old Vikings along. We'll score.